Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you coming from the Big Easy, Ernest Ellender. And he is a black belt trauma coach, which is really interesting. He's got a very interesting story coming from sunny California Bay Area to the work he's doing. He's got a lot of interesting ideas about transitions and getting out of the mainstream. Really interesting, and I'm happy to have him to the show. So, Ernest, welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Doctor, for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I love having guests such as yourself, and we keep it very informal, so we always go by first names. So, talk about your background, and I know we talked a little bit. You grew up or you trained in California, and now you're doing a lot of trauma coaching. And so talk about that journey and we'll dive right into it.
Yeah. Sure. Louisiana, just south of New Orleans. A lot of people say, wait, there's something south of New Orleans. And yes, you can drive about an hour and a half south before you hit the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm, half of the way there. So it's not far to the Gulf. Grew up here hunting, fishing, swimming in the bayous and everything. And then when it came time for undergraduate, I stayed here, but for graduate school, I went out in your neck of the woods. You said you're out in San Francisco. I was out in Palo Alto for 7 years, going for that PhD in clinical psychology, and then I did my 1-year internship on the East Coast in New York, Poughkeepsie, New York. So I got to see, I got to grow up in the South and understand how people in the South think, and then I got to see a bit of how the California folk think, and then the same thing out there in New York. So that was a tour de force for my academic pursuits. And then, but when I was done with studying and everything, I was looking forward to coming back home where all my friends and family are. And that's where I hung my shingle and started doing just clinical psychology, functioning as a clinical psychologist, got licensed and all that stuff. I did that for 10 or 12 years. Before accumulating this curriculum that I wanted to create into a book, and I took some time off, made that into a book that I just published this year, finally. and now I'm continuing to launch that book and also do life coaching. And the book is on trauma recovery. That's kind of that is my specialty. And so that's what I like to focus on. When you said the black belt trauma coach, trauma coaching refers to, I just really enjoy working with this complex world of healing from and getting past childhood trauma. And I'm also into a lot of martial arts. So I literally have a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. That's where that crossover comes in there. That's what I do now, run a Jiu Jitsu martial arts school and do my life coaching, trauma coaching, and also do some marketing of my book to kind of get the information out there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. And there's three different avenues. I think the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt is more kind of physical and mental, and then we can talk about how you incorporate that into your practice. Your core practice is trauma and healing and coaching, and we were talking, one thing is what made you go into this area, and you actually broke away from mainstream to what you're doing now. Talk about how you had to break free, and then why trauma in this situation. Why could you not do trauma healing in the mainstream?
Oh man, there's a lot. So in general, when I started out as a clinical psychologist, people would come to me because I was on their insurance list. It's almost like it didn't matter what my specialty was or what I was into or what I wanted to work on. People came to me because of insurance. And that was perfectly fine, especially when you're getting started. I was brand new, had my shiny degree, and had my first clients come in that I got to keep for years at a time, and had a strong learning curve as a young therapist and whatnot. And then, a decade later, I was really in the final stages of finishing my book, really working on that. And it was extremely time consuming, and had a little bit of difficulty with my perfectionism and OCD kind of getting in the way of finishing the project. I ended up taking time off for various reasons to finish writing this book. And when it came time to get back out there, I wanted to specialize, to remain specialized. I wanted to see clients who sought me out because of my specialty, for working with people with these trauma histories that are getting in the way of successes in their relationships or in their business world because of their childhood trauma stuff. Basically wanted to specialize. And as a life coach, you also do not have to deal with insurance and with the whole world of all that bureaucratic mess and all that stuff. So I'm getting out there as that trauma life coach, as well as getting that authoring stuff going. I really enjoyed writing the book. I think writing a second one I would be able to finish it much quicker, do a much better, much more efficient job of it. So we'll see. I want to make this one successful.
Yeah, I can tell that you're a real, you have a real knack for attention to details. Classic, want to do well. So, moving forward in the conversation and the discussion is so when you say trauma coaching, and it's interesting how, because life coaching, you can basically break away from traditional insurance and you can kind of treat the way you want to treat it versus having to fulfill this insurance mandate. So but when you say trauma, what are the top things that are people coming to you for when you say trauma? Is it because we as a species, we had to use the we had to fight for our survival, shelter, clothing, food, all of that, and now we have all of that. So what is kind of the underlying trauma that people are coming? Is it self-esteem? Is it abuse, neglect, bullying, discrimination? Kind of set the stage.
Very good. I'll start with if somebody has a good, healthy enough childhood, safe childhood, and as an adult they encounter a lot of some kind of trauma, like a car accident or a mugging or something like that, that is a kind of straightforward sense of like a post-traumatic stress disorder type of situation that we want to avoid, so we can directly deal with that trauma right after it happened. The part where I focus more on is this other realm where human beings as children were either neglected, traumatized, abused, physically, sexually abused. And when it occurs in childhood, a child's mind and functioning in that survival response just kind of stays on high alert. And it creates these very unhealthy, like subconscious rules that a child's mind implements. The child's mind encounters this trauma. Let's say a mother abuses a child. The child has to deal with this in their head somehow as a little tiny child. So they might make up these little subconscious rules that they say, the person who's supposed to love me is going to disappoint me or is going to hurt me. I'm something about themselves. I'm not worthy of love or connection or safety. It's me against the world. I'm all alone. So these are these subconscious things that get planted in there. And then as an adult, we'll kind of forget about them. And it's not necessarily we forget about them, but we function, we get by, we learn how to look and act normal out there. But it's when we get into an intimate situation or in a combative situation or in some kind of conflict comes up and we get triggered to those thoughts, and those thoughts come up and they cause us to do things. So, for example, in a intimate relationship, if I truly believe that the people who are supposed to love me, my new spouse is supposed to love me, but I truly believe in my subconscious, because as a kid that happened, that they're going to eventually hurt me, then I'm just waiting for it to happen. And I'm waiting for it to happen. I start behaving like it's happening or like it's going to happen, even though it's not happening and it would never. It's these childhood subconscious false beliefs. And in my book, we just call it trauma lies. It's a trauma lie This trauma taught us a lie that everyone who's supposed to love me is going to hurt me. And then in the business world, you might go into a situation where you have what do you call it, a conflict with a colleague or with a business partner, and then that subconscious thing pops up. This person who's supposed to be on my side is going to try to screw me over here. I believe it. I know it in my heart. And so we might behave in a very reactive and aggressive fashion. And so these are the setups where a lot of the childhood experiences implant these trauma lies, these negative, very oppositional, very combative, very isolative, very fear-inducing statements that cause us to react in unhealthy or in aggressive or in overly combative ways in our personal relationships or in our business relationships. So that's the environment in which I enjoy working with. There's somebody who has identified, they know, okay, I think my childhood is causing me stress that I'm taking out on my significant other. And sometimes it's hard to connect the dots there. They just think their significant other is being difficult, and so they want to kind of attack them, They don't recognize how much of it is their childhood and impairing the flow of collaboration. So that's the people I like working with the most. So we can connect those dots, see how the childhood affected this, get out of that reactive style of responding to people aggressively, and choose to incorporate new skills and new views of the world and views of other people and views of ourselves that are more harmonious, more conducive to success.
Yeah, interesting. And so follow up to that is, we talk about these kind of like these micro traumas, like, I'm very familiar with these, these isolationist and it's kind of like the world against, because, I lost a parent at a very young age. So I'm like, yeah, you can't trust the world. But these things are just like kind of a traumatic thing or a car accident or, somebody, got assaulted or, or raped or whatever. These really, kind of and then they kind of generalize it. But what happens if, like, for example, and just kind of, this is an example, for example, African Americans, they have to be cognizant that, there is severe discrimination. They can end up in jail. The police, there's bad apples out there. So they have to be on guard. So, these beliefs and things are actually real. These protect them. So, versus like kind of just like these over exaggerated impressions. So how does someone distinguish between someone like a real threat and something that's kind of like, go ahead. I know what you're going to.
Yeah. What a fantastic question. Yes. Because that's a wonderful example of where it gets into this gray area that is absolutely very challenging. All right. And originally when I was getting into studying this topic of childhood trauma and intergenerational, a generational or transgenerational, they use all three of those words, intergenerational, transgenerational, generational trauma being handed down to the next generation, a lot of the research focuses more on these larger ethnic and cultural groupings. And I was more focused on the individual human being and an individual family unit. Like what is going on in this family structure that allows for so much trauma to keep happening to them? Like what's going on there? And that was the question I wanted to answer. And that's what a book seeks to do. Okay. And then when we get into that kind of a question, very specific to actual individual cultural groups, it goes into the process. So I outline in my book, we talk about breathe, plan, do. So that what do we do when we're encountering something and I'm not sure what's going on and my brain is perceiving it as danger? Then we go through this process, take a deep breath, breathe until I can get into my calm state. If I'm in a survival response, if I'm amped up and aggressive, I can't think clearly and I cannot make my best decision that has the longest term likeliness for success, likelihood of success, right? So first I have to calm myself down. So I breathe, plan. And under planning, the first thing, especially when somebody has a childhood trauma history, the first thing we like to practice is saying, is this right now a life-threatening situation or not? Is it life-threatening? If I can say, well, no, if somebody's in a spot where they're being denied a place in line or something, they think, is this a racial thing? It's like, okay, first of all, is it life-threatening? So we're trying to train the brain because a child's primal brain just got ramped up on chronic survival mode and it stays there. So we have to learn how to get ourselves out of it, calm down, and then in this moment, if it's not life-threatening, then I'm going to think better and perform better if I calm down and stay calm and I'm not in survival mode. So that's first. But then after we teach that primal brain, so there's the parts of the brain, right? The amygdala and all these parts of the brain that are part of the survival response. It activates that survival system. We have to educate that brain, that part of the brain, as to what is life-threatening and what is not life-threatening. Once we've identified, okay, this is not life-threatening, but does have to do with, with thriving or, fairness and all these types of concepts, right? Well, then the next part, if we've had a awful childhood or childhood traumas and these trauma lies, it's me against the world, or the people who are supposed to be good people are going to attack me. It's up to each individual to decide whether they want to hang on to that trauma lie or replace it with a thriving, mature, adult life truth. And life truths are always a lot longer, and it helps guide me. So, for example, in this particular moment, I might say, well, this is not life-threatening. This person is not being positive toward me. Well, there are people who are bad out there, who are damaging, who are sociopathic, who are racist, who are discriminatory. There are people out there, but not all people out there are like that. And so it's just this mature understanding, like, well, of course there are dangerous people, of course there is people. And in this particular moment, what do I need to do to thrive? I need to be a great self-advocate. I need to align with, I need to collaborate with people to thrive and succeed in life. Not survive, not get by, not squeak by, but to really thrive. And so it's a process of slowing down and deciding what we want to be our life truths. It's how we perceive things is very much how we experience it. So that is definitely a tough one, right? It's definitely challenging, especially in these gray area things where I'm not sure what's going on exactly. And instead of reacting to the situation, we're going to do our best to live and be proactive according to our values. Well, you know what? Whatever this other person is trying to do, I'm going to be a collaborative, good person, or I'm going to be a tough guy, whatever you want to be. So try to get out of this reactionary victim or survivor mindset and into a thriving, I'm in charge of my life, I'm in charge of my environment, and I'm going to succeed in that because I'm going to make it so.
Yeah.
It's a long answer to a short, but it's such a great question, man. It's such a challenging question, right?
Interesting. I know, because, one of the things about this podcast is you get to meet a lot of different people, and, you have this what I say is, kind of your impressions, your prejudgments are usually 99% off. And so it's kind of like how you describe it, and just kind of like assess it. And the thing is, you mentioned, is this life threatening? I always, to calm myself down, is like, does this need to be done now? Because I can't wait. So that kind of like settles me down and allows me to think a little bit versus on this, very interesting.
Yeah.
I know we have kind of concluded with because you seem to have a lot of interesting takes, from going from mainstream to your own, and then these ideas on trauma. How can people find you and, contact you, find out more about your book? That's
Oh,
really interesting. This Trauma Lies.
great. Yeah, let's see. My book is called "This Is How We Heal from Painful Childhoods: A Practical Guide for Healing Past Intergenerational Stress and Trauma." I appreciate you asking. Sometimes I forget to throw that out there. It's available in the Amazon bookstore. One way to might be easy to remember, you just go to healfromchildhood.com. That's a website for my book, healfromchildhood.com, or ErnestEllenderPhD.com. That's my life coaching services. I do in-person and online virtual trauma coaching. So yeah, ErnestEllenderPhD.com or healfromchildhood.com. Sorry. I am on Facebook, Ernest Ellender. Yeah, those are the main spots to find me.
Excellent. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I can tell a lot, it really helps me guide how I connect with podcast guests such as yourself. And for all the audience, be sure to give Ernest's socials a like and follow. Check out his book. I'm going to check it out as well. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me. I really appreciate it. This was fantastic, man. Fun questions, too.